welcome or welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha and this is my channel where I talk all about books. Anyway, today I'm coming to you with my last wrap up of 2024. We are a little bit far into January, so I'm sorry that this video is so late, but I still wanted to chat about the books that I read in December. I read quite a few books, although a lot of them are already in reading vlogs of some way, shape, or form, because I did do Vlogmas in December. So yeah, I spoke about a lot of the books that I was reading in other vlogs. So if we get to that book and I feel like I've already covered it enough on this channel, I will just point you in the right direction to the vlog where I talk about it more if you want more information. But yeah, let's talk about all of the books that I read in the last month of the year. And also, if you were interested in any of my Vlogmas videos, I'll link the whole playlist down below and you can get caught up, because I had a lot of end of the year content and stuff in there as well. So if you wanted to watch that, I'll link the playlist down below. But yeah, if you've never watched one of my wrap-ups before, we go over my statistics, which I get from Storygraph, and then we will go through all of the books that I read and what I rated them, and then I will give reviews of books that I feel like I have more to say about, or I haven't spoken about them on my channel before, or not recently, or whatever. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So let's start off with my statistics. In the month of December, I read a total of 8 books. I read 2,051 pages and I listened to 13.77 hours of audiobooks. And on average, it took me 5 days to finish a book. And then in terms of my moods, 6 of the books I read were funny, 5 were adventurous, 4 mysterious, 4 lighthearted, 2 tense, and 2 hopeful. I feel like that's less moods than usual. Normally I have a whole host of moods. I like to read all sorts of different stuff. In terms of the pace, I read 50-50 medium and fast-paced books. For my page number, I had 3 books that were under 300 pages, and I had 4 books that were between 300 and 499 pages, because most of the books I read are in that second category. In terms of audiobook length, I listened to one audiobook and it was between 8 and 15 hours and 59 minutes. And my fiction nonfiction split, we had 100% fiction. I should, in theory, have read a nonfiction book, because it was my goal to read one nonfiction book a month, or 12 throughout the year, and I did fail that. But yeah, we read only fiction in December. For my genres, I had 5 romance, 4 fantasy, 2 young adult, 2 contemporary, 1 middle grade, 1 mystery, and 1 historical. For my format, I read 5 books digitally, 2 books in print, and 1 on audio. And for my star rating, I had an average rating of 3.56, which I actually think is higher than some of my previous ones. It's still not super high, and ideally this year I would have a higher rating every month, but yeah, 3.56 I'm sad to say is probably one of my higher ones. I had 3 3-star reads, 1 3.25, 1 3.5, 1 3.75, 1 4, and 1 5-star read. So yeah, that's actually good. I had nothing under 3 stars, which is probably maybe a first for the whole year. I feel like I gave out so many 2 stars. Anyway, that is all for the statistics, and now let's get into all of the books that I read and what I rated. Okay, so the first book that I finished in the month of December was The Rebel Witch by Kristen Cicerelli. This is an arc. It's actually coming out in February of this year, and I gave this 3 stars. Then I read Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend, and I gave this 4 stars. Then I read Merriment and Mayhem by Alexandria Bellefleur, and I gave this 3 stars. Next, I read Only Santa's in the Building by Alexis Daria, and I gave this 3.25 stars. Then I read All I Want Is You by Fallon Ballard, and I gave this 3 stars. I read The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ali Carter, and I gave that 3.5 stars. And my penultimate book of 2024 was a reread of Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and I gave this 5 stars. And the book that I finished off the year with was My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Jodie Meadows, and Brody Ashton. I got an advanced copy of the audiobook of this, which is coming out in February, and I gave this 3.75 stars. So those were all of the books that I read, and now we're going to get into more details about everything. So we're going to go from the lowest rated to the highest rated, but we're going to start off with the last 2 novellas and the Amazon original Christmas novellas that they released in November. So yeah, we had Merriment and Mayhem by Alexandria Bellefleur. Like I said, I gave that 3 stars. I thought that one was okay, but it wasn't great. It was just fine. I don't really have anything else to say about it, actually. And Only Santa's in the Building was one of my favorite, I use that word loosely, but one of my favorite ones from the collection. My favorite was the Ali Hazelwood one, surprisingly, because I haven't had the best luck with her books. But yeah, I gave that one 3.5, I think. So it still wasn't great, but as they went, my favorite was the Ali Hazelwood one, and then Only Santa's in the Building, and then Merriment and Mayhem, and then the other 2 were both 1 star. They were not the most successful for me, personally. I think that view is quite widely shared. These were not very good. But I also think that I'm probably not a romance novella girly, because I want my romances to have quite a bit of time to develop. Like, I don't want them to be super long, but I also don't like insta love, and these were just not very good. So yeah, those were like the worst ones I read this month. And then we had The Rebel Witch by Kristen Cicerelli. Like I said, this is an arc. It's coming out in, I think it's coming out in February this year or March. I can't exactly remember, but this is the second and final book in the Crimson Moth duology. The first book is The Crimson Moth, also known as Heartless Hunter. I do believe the content is exactly the same. They just have different titles for whatever reason. And I live in the UK where we call it The Crimson Moth. This is the second and final book in the Crimson Moth duology. The Crimson Moth follows our main character, Rune. She is a witch living in this world where being a witch has been outlawed and witches are hunted down and killed. And there was this revolution a few years prior. And so now they have these witch hunters, and Rune by day masquerades as like a socialite airhead, and by night she is the Crimson Moth and basically rescues other witches and helps smuggle them off the island. And so she has decided that the best course of action for her is to court the captain of the Blood Guard, aka the witch hunters, in order to gain his information and aid her cause without him knowing. And the captain of the Blood Guard happens to be her best friend's older brother, and so she decides to court him. Gideon, the head of the Blood Guard, decides to court her because he thinks that she's the Crimson Moth and wants to get closer to her so she will reveal her secrets, and everything happens from there. I did not like this series as much as I was hoping to. I actually requested the second book thinking that it would hopefully be even better than the first book. However, I didn't like the second book as much as the first. I just felt like, unfortunately, a lot of the plot points felt very rushed, but also kind of random. And I think a lot of stuff that happened in this book could have happened in the first book, because I also think that the first book didn't have enough going on. So I think if she had spread all of the plot points between the two books, it would have felt better. The pacing would have been better. It would have been more interesting. It would have made more sense for me personally. So that was one thing. And then my main issue was that the ending climax of the whole series took place in about 20 pages, and it was just over in the blink of an eye, and I don't think it was particularly well done. So unfortunately, I did not love this series. It was fine. If you want a witchy romantasy which doesn't have a lot of spice, then I would recommend it, but not my favorite thing, unfortunately. Speaking of not my favorite thing, I read a couple holiday romances for a specific reading vlog, which I put up on Christmas Eve, so you may not have seen it, but if you want to check it out, I'll link it up in the card. But I read All I Want Is You by Fallon Ballard, so I'm not going to talk about that again here because I went into quite a bit of detail in that video, but like I said, I gave it 3 stars. And I also read The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ali Carter, which is like a cozy romance mystery sort of book. Yeah, I read both of those in that vlog. And if you want more details about those 2 books, I'll link that video up in the card for you. Moving on, like I said, my last book of the year was My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Jodi Meadows, and Brody Ashton, but this was not my highest rated book of the month. I gave this 3.75 stars, as I said. I enjoyed this book, but I actually preferred the TV show, which might be like a bad thing to say, but I watched the show first, and then unfortunately I heard that it got cancelled, which I am really heartbroken about. I really wanted to know how everything would end. I listened to it on audio. The audio was really well done. It's just one narrator, but she did such a good job of doing different accents, and like you could really tell which characters were which. If you don't know what My Lady Jane is about, it basically follows our main character, Jane, and she essentially is forced to marry someone who she doesn't know. Her mom is kind of meddling in her life and has high expectations for Jane, so she decides to marry Jane off. But at the same time, King Edward has been very sick, and so he basically appoints Jane to take over the throne if something were to happen to him. There's a lot of like meddling and court politics and stuff like that, because essentially who Jane is getting married to, his father wants to put Jane on the throne so that his son can become the king, and it's all just very dramatic and catty in a way. It's very fun. It's definitely a reimagining, and it is actually a fantasy. There are fantastical elements to it. Very fun. Like I said, I prefer the TV show, but the book was very good, and I'm glad that I read it because the way that the TV show did it, the first season was like part 1 of the book, and then part 2 of the book I can only assume was going to be the second season, but obviously it was cancelled. But now I know how everything ends up, and it was really cute. It was nice, fun, enjoyed it. Nothing else to say. But speaking of not having a lot to say about something, the next book I'm going to talk about is Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend. This is the 3rd book in the Nevermore series, and this one was a little bit darker than the other ones. It's definitely getting darker as it goes along. If you don't know what Nevermore is about though, this basically follows our main character, Morgan Crow. She was born on this cursed day, and she is destined to die on her 11th birthday. But just before the stroke of midnight on her 11th birthday, she is whisked away by this man called Jupiter North to a place called Nevermore, where she gets the opportunity to join the Wonder Society already. But in order to do so, she has to take part in some trials. And in the final trial, she's going to have to show off her special talent, which she doesn't have. And that's where the first book starts off. And then we go from there. It's full of found family and whimsy and magic. It's a really fun series and I would highly recommend it. And finally, the last book we're going to talk about is none other than Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. Like I said, this was a reread for me. I first read this book in 2014 when I first started my YouTube channel, and it was a 5-star read back then. And then I actually reread the series in 2019 in preparation for the release of the final book. And then recently, I've just seen a lot of people reading it for the first time or rereading it. And actually, one of my best friends is currently reading the series for the first time, and she would just text me all of her updates about the books, and I just really wanted to read it with her. And I'm like 3 books behind, but I'm desperately trying to catch up to her because I'm having such a fun time with this series. Oh my goodness, this was just what I needed. After quite a lackluster reading year last year, rereading this series is actually just what I needed. It is exactly what I needed. If you don't know what this series is about, where have you been? This book basically follows our main character, Selena Sarakian. She is an 18-year-old assassin who for the last year has been living in the salt mines of Indovier as a slave, and she is basically approached by the crown prince to compete in this tournament to become the king's champion, which is basically his personal assassin. And by doing this, by winning the competition, she will eventually get her freedom. So she decides that she's going to take part in this competition, and all sorts of craziness ensues. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg with the series. I say that every time, but if you struggle with the first 2 books, I would say keep going, because the 3rd book really kicks up a notch and we go in a bit of a different direction. And then the 4th book is actually genuinely one of my favorite books of all time. Not even just of the series, it's one of my favorite books of all time. I cannot wait to get to it because that reread is going to be so fun. I love this book so much. It was 5 stars yet again. I think I'll always rate this book 5 stars. Not the whole series, but this book, I love it. And I loved being back with these characters. It's such a good time for me. There's also like death and gore and it's kind of intense, but I still love it. And it still felt really like cozy coming back to this series that I know and love. Anyway, those were the 8 books that I read in the month of December. Please let me know what you read down below and let me know what your favorite book of the year was, if you can narrow it down to just one. I would love to know. But anyway, that is all that I have for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, please leave me a sword down below for Selena Sarakian. I love her. That is all. So I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.